Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started then. So welcome everybody to this month's Lunch and Learn session. So we did poll everybody, and it was decided that based on everybody's feedback that we are going to do these calls monthly. So we did have quite a bit to cover in our last month's call. So we thought by doing it monthly as opposed to quarterly, we can make them much quicker, and it also gets information out to you as soon as new features are launched into TransIT. So today we're just going to take a look at what's new in TransIT 5. So the agenda then is the enhancements that have been added since the January virtual user group, and then we'll finish it off with a tip of the month. So for starters, I have signed into TransIT. I'm right now just under one of our demonstration organizations. So big thing that has been added back to TransIT 5 that we had been missing the last few months is the ability to merge a project into your current state. So as you create projects for your organization, once you've completed all of your testing for that project, what you should be doing is merging that content to your current state, because your current state should have a full list of all of the content that's active for your organization for anything that is currently live. So in order to merge your content from your project into the current state, I'm going to use this example here for this enrollment project. So if I want to merge my project, what I'll do is I'll right click on the project and I will select to merge project. Once you do that, what it's going to do is it's going to give you a full list of everything that's going to be moved from your project into current state. So it starts off by showing you what workflows are being moved in, the scenarios that are going to be moved in, the tasks. And then if we scroll, yes, that's quite a few tasks, but if we scroll to the bottom, sorry for all my scrolling, then we can see at the bottom here, there's some additional things that have been added that weren't actually previously available in the merge functionality for TransIT 4. So the additions are that you can now choose to either move the issues from that project into your current state, or you can decide to leave them separate. You also have the choice to inactivate any plans that are associated to that project. And if you do not decide to inactivate them, it will just leave them in your list of plans, and it'll just show the same project name there listed, but the project will no longer be active because the project has been merged into your current state. So by default, it's going to have it selected to move all of the issues into current state as well as your plans to inactivate your plans. If you happen to want to either not move in your issues or not inactivate your plans, then you can just deselect those check marks there and it will not have them selected for you. So once you've reviewed and understand what's going to be merged from the project that you're working on into your current state, you can then click merge. And so just like we've seen in other areas of TransIT, all of the work that's happening is going to happen in the background. So you're still able to continue working in TransIT, doing the things that you're doing, and the merge is actually happening in the background. So org settings. So I'm essentially going to go through all of the top options here and review all of the enhancements that have been added for each of the different options there. So for our org settings, a change that you will notice is from within the vendors page. So when you clicked into the vendors page before, it used to have page numbers at the bottom. So page 1 to 9 or whatever it was. And so now that's been removed. And now all of the vendors are displayed on one page. As a reminder, if you're not wanting to see all of the full list of vendors and you're only wanting to see the vendors that are active for your organization, you can right click the blue bar and select view selected vendors, which will then refresh the list to only show the vendors that are currently turned on for your organization. Under users. So users have, under the users section, you have the ability now to send an email or text notification to any of the users. And so this is functionality that only someone who's currently set up as an administrator would be able to do. So if you're not set up as an administrator, you will not have this users option available to you in the blue bar. But if you are someone that it's a user, then you have the option to select users. And if you're wanting to select or select someone to send a note to, you can right click your name and select send email. It then opens this window for you, which you can type out whatever you'd like to notify that person about. And if you were wanting to include a text message as well, you do have the option to check that. And as long as that person has their email address and their text notifications turned on, then when you click send email, it is going to send a notification to that person. Okay, so from within tasks. So previously under tasks, if you were wanting to inactivate a task, even if that task was currently being used inside a scenario, it did let you remove the task, which of course you do not want to do. If something's being used, you don't want to be removing it from your build and then mess up where it's being used inside a scenario. So now if you attempt to inactivate a task that is being used inside a scenario, so I can see that task number 5934 is being used inside a scenario because it's showing me that indicator off to the left-hand side. So if I was to attempt to inactivate this task, I acknowledge it here, but then I get this notification that is telling me that it's in use and it cannot be activated. So of course, that's not something you want to be doing. You don't want to be removing anything that's in use. So if I was wanting to copy a task but have it applied to a different vendor, when I right click the task and select create copy, and I select my new vendor, it will bring me into the steps page. What it was previously doing was it was not updating the vendor inside the steps page. So that has been fixed, and now it's automatically updating the vendor from the the task steps page. So workflows. So when you insert a workflow into a scenario, it does give you the notification on the left-hand side here to let you know which scenario those workflows are being used in. Um, However, previously, when you were inserting a workflow that was not yet in your organization, so you're inserting it into a scenario from our global content, it wasn't actually automatically updating this column here to let you know the number of scenarios that's been added to, but that has been added. So once a workflow is added to a scenario that's coming in from our global content, it is going to automatically add that workflow to your workflow build. And it's also going to show you the number on the left-hand side to show where that workflow is currently being used. From within scenarios, so this isn't really one thing that's going to be easy to show, but we have removed the ability to have multiple people inserting content into scenarios at the same time. So what's going to happen is if you are in the process of adding something to a scenario and someone else is in the process of adding things to a scenario, you are going to from within this window after I click next. If I was trying to add something to my scenario here, but someone else in my organization was already adding to the scenario, it will not show me this save button. So that's the way that we've made it so that you cannot have two people inserting things into a scenario at the same time. So recognizing our header functionality from within a scenario. So I've got a spreadsheet here. And so from TransIT 4 to TransIT 5, we went from uploading scripts to instead copying and pasting from an Excel spreadsheet into TransIT. So when you do that, you have the opportunity to include some header or detail functionality into your steps using the brackets in the same fashion that we do when we're documenting tasks inside TransIT. There's 5 different ways that you can go about that, and I've got 5 different examples here. So in my first example here, you can see I've got a bracket at the beginning here, and I've got a bracket at the end here. What this step is going to do is it's going to include everything in here all into my steps. So I will go into TransIT and I'll show you what it looks like after it's been pasted into TransIT as well. So this is asking me to have inside one of these details fields in my scenario, I want to have all of these fields. So I want it to have patient name plus pull patient name from the header, same with the, sorry, last name, same with first name, and same with date of birth. So that's the first example. The next example is how you need it to be typed out if you want it to pull in from the header information for just a single field. So this is asking me that when this is pasted into TransIT, I want this field to read that it's going to have typed into a details field patient name inside brackets so that it pulls that information from the header. The next example is showing you something similar, but the difference here is here, this is having the patient name header field typed inside a details field, which means that at the scenario level or at the workflow level, that field is still available to be typed into. So if we were thinking about things like fin, so if this said fin, for example, because it's typed into a details field, I do still have the opportunity to add numbers to that. So fin 2, fin 3, etc. Whereas in this case, patient name is going to show in black text, so you're not going to be able to update that from the scenario steps page. The next is having something typed into a details field. So this appointments here, it's not one of our header fields. It's saying that we want appointments typed into a details field. So meaning that this field is going to be available to update from the scenario steps. And then the last example here is just you want to have a details field available to you at the scenario level. So if I go back to TransIT here, and I go to my scenario. So this was already pasted in. So here's the first example. So this is what I was trying to say. So by putting a bracket at the beginning and at the end, so I'll just jump back. So I've got a bracket here. I've got a bracket here, closing off everything within this field here. How it ends up looking when it's pasted into TransIT is all of these things are typed into a single details. So this is available for me to edit, so I could continue. So if I also wanted to do a fin field, I decide after it's pasted in, I can continue to add whatever I need to add to it there. So the next one, so I was saying that we wanted a patient name field that is available to edit. So how that looks here is we've got a double bracket. So patient name essentially listed inside brackets. So that ends up getting you this example here. So this is a details field that's available to me to type into. So I could add additional things into this field if I wanted to. But the difference between how this appears and how this appears here is here it's typed in, patient name is added at the task level. So when it's used inside a scenario, that's not available for me to type into. Here I showed that this is something typed into a details field. So again, appointments is not one of our header fields. It's just saying I want appointments added into my details field. So again, that's available for me to edit if I need to. And then the last one is just giving me this details field that I'm able to add whatever details I want to add there. So those are the 4 different ways that you can include details into a scenario when you're doing a copy from Excel and pasting it into TransIT. Does someone have a question? No. Okay. So the next is our testing section. So we have quite a few additions to our testing section here. So the first that I'm going to show you is we now have colored bars that display to separate the different sections for when a position starts and when a position stops. So it's now quite colorful when you come to your test steps page. So you can see we start off with our first position and the bar is just white. Then we've got green because it's switching from the EDRN to the RN. And then as we scroll down, now we've got purple, or a pink and a purple. So the idea behind this is it's just more of a visual indicator to make sure that you are not passing steps for a different position. And where this can definitely come in handy is when you're using the position filter. So it's just going to help to make sure that you're not passing steps that do not apply to you and passing things out of order. We'll go back to testing here. So when you are adding, so let's say you set up your test round and you realize, oh, I actually wanted to add some additional scenarios to my test round. So you can do that by right-clicking and add test scripts, which is always something that we've had available to us. But what would happen before is even scenarios that had already been added to my test round would still show in this list here. But now the list that you're reviewing when you're adding test scripts to an existing test round is only going to be a list of scenarios that have not already been added to that existing test round. Okay, and so the next thing has to do with steps from our test report. So I've got steps from my test report here, and as you should know, when you are going from your test report, if you're wanting to make updates to a scenario from your test report, you can right click and you can select open scenario. When you do that, you can see that now the numbers are coinciding with the numbers as they are inside the scenario. Whereas before, what was happening when you open your test steps from the test report is it was just automatically starting at step number 1 or saying it was step number 2, even though when you look at the scenario, the step wasn't actually step number one. It was just assigning step number one because it's the first step that you're looking at once you've opened the scenario from the test report. So it's now correcting, it's showing you the step number as it is if you were to view it from the scenarios page. I am going to go close out of this so I can go back to my test report here. So we have added the ability to be able to send email notifications or text notifications from the test report. So what I know I've experienced from a round of testing is you're working through your test report. When the test note was assigned to someone, they did receive an email notification off the bat to let them know that there was a note assigned to them, but stuff got busy and they never got a chance to go into the test report to make the changes that they were required to do. So we now have the option to right click and send a email reminder. And so it's going to give me the option to type a reminder to them here. I could also choose to send them a text message. So I could do text and email, or I could just do email, and I can send the email. And so that's just a way of sending the exact spot that you're needing them to look at from the test report, so that you're making sure that your test report's getting worked through to its entirety from a round of testing. When you do that, when you send that notification to the person that's needing the email reminder, the email is going to look like this. So here is the note that I got. And if I was wanting to open to the test report here, this link now is going to take you exactly to the test report, that the test report note that you're wanting that person to review. So the link will take you exactly where you need it to be. So the next has to do with our roster. So if I open the roster here, so reports and a roster. So if I open the roster here, if there were multiple lines that I wanted to assign someone to cover that for, I can now multi-select on this. So I could select this row, I could hold down control, select here, I could select multiple rows, and I'd be able to add user and assign coverage to multiple lines at the same time. So I'm gonna just select this person, and they're now assigned to all of the spots that I had selected. So if you have someone covering multiple different positions from around testing, that just helps to speed up that process. So the next, I'm going to go back to testing, and I will go to my test dashboard. So from the test dashboard, we have this option here to add. I can right click and I can add a note. So we generally recommend people use this note to assign who is going to be working on that row. And so before, if you were wanting to get rid of the note there, you had to open your note, and you'd have to do this and do a space bar just to have the note remove. But we now have added the option to be able to just right click and delete note. So you don't have to do the space bar to have that blank out. In addition to that, to the note column here, when we look at it from the perspective of a functional test round, We have a additional row on the test round for each of the different sections in your script. But now you have the ability to add a note for each of the different lines in your test script. So let's say you're adding or you're wanting to assign different sections to different people. I'd be able to say, type someone in one row and it's just going to show in that single row. I could then edit and add someone else's name here. And I could continue to do that for as many different rows as I needed to. So now we're moving on to our issues. That's everything new for testing. So this is our issue dashboard. I'm going to click here to view all of my issues. So we've added the capabilities, switch the order in which the column fields display in. So if I was to right click and select change column and select display sequence. So it gives you a notification that says enter a new display sequence, 0 to remove, 10 plus to move. So 10 or more to move it over each column. So if I say 20 in here, it's now moved my column over as I've requested it to. In addition, for issues, we've added some new fields to when we're creating a new issue. So I've clicked to create a new issue. We have added the vendor contact field. We've added the emergency change, so you can select to have an emergency change. And then we've also added the requested date. So you're able to enter the requested date and time if you'd like into those fields. So that is it for issues. I'll just close out of these. The next thing is for plans. So I have an example plan here. So we have added the ability to renumber the rows here by requested start date. So if we look here at my plan, you can see that the first one in the list here has a start date of February 1st, and the next two have February 23rd. If I want to automatically renumber them based on the start date, I am going to highlight the first row that I'm wanting to make a change to and select the others. I have all of the options selected. I can right click and I'm going to go down here to where it says modify. And from there, I'm going to select to renumber the start date. And so you can see it's moved these two up because their start date was older than the start date of the one that was initially the first in the row. So those are all of the enhancements that we have from that covered since our last virtual user group. A reminder that if you're wanting to see what all of the enhancements were, so there were some fixes that went in. I only focused on what our enhancements were, but there were some fixes. And if you're wanting to see a list of what those are, a reminder that under reports and then under release notes, we have a list of everything that was either added, so new functionality for the release, or what was fixed for that release. So you're able to scroll through and look at everything that was covered. So everything that was since our last virtual user group starts on January 21st. So if you are wanting to see a complete list of things that were released, and what was fixed within the month, then you can go back here and review all of what's here. So the last thing that I'll add for today is our tip of the month. So I did show that from testing and opening a test report, when you go into a test note and you open the scenario view, it's going to, like I said, bring it open to where your test note was made, and it has that line number starting at line number 6. So obviously we know that there are 5 steps that are ahead of this, but based on where my note was, it was marked at this spot in the scenario. If I was wanting to be able to see what those 5 steps are before, so just helping me to make sure I'm understanding, what steps are there, if it's asking me to add additional steps. If I hover my cursor over the name that's the scenario name here, and I right click, I can select to open in a new tab. And when I do that, it's actually opening the scenario as the scenario exists under the scenario tab. So what that does is now I've got 2 different tabs open for this particular scenario. So I can toggle back and forth. So here I can see here are the 5 steps that are above the step that is where my note was marked. So it allows me to better understand what impacts it's going to make if I'm making changes, and just understand what those steps were based on where the note was tied to. So that was everything that I was going to show for today. Does anybody have any questions before we sign off?
Hey, Angela, this is Brian Hugeback. I had a question on the roster.
Yep.
So I saw that you could select multiple positions and add a user to those with one choice.
Mm-hmm.
Can you add multiple users to a position? So I had like multiple testers for one position
Yes.
at the same time, or do you have to? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, but when you're multi-selecting, it lets you choose 2 people at once.
Yes.
Yeah, so when you search, for the person and you select them, are you able to search for another person, with a different last name that starts with a different letter? Does it save your search selection from the first one and allows you to search for the second one, or do you have to just scroll down and click the box against each of the people's checkbox next to each of the users' names?
So the search I don't believe retains. So if I was to hold down my control, oops, sorry, and add user. If I was to search here, if I had stuff selected, I don't believe that it retains that, but let's.
Okay, just use the scroll bar and use the
Yeah, so
checkboxes. Okay,
right, yep, yeah. So I could do this.
that works.
Yeah. So it did add additional rows for those people. I had selected all of these 3 when adding. Were there any other questions?
When you do that, Angela, is it updating their user settings for associating that position to them in their own user settings login?
Patty?
I'm sure that the answer is yes, and we're actually working on that as we speak. So right now, the roster, if you assign somebody the position on the roster, it updates their user record if that wasn't already there. And it also would update for every test round that's open. So we are working on making it, the roster is test round specific. And so when you go into the
Okay.
roster, it'll populate with whatever you used the last time. But if you've got a different set of people testing, like say you're using subject matter experts and they're changing because it's a different site, it is going to allow you to keep it specific to a test round or specific, the way you guys do. If you do multiple sites at the same time and
Right.
you each have their dashboard, you'd be able to assign them separately. Right now, you can't do that. So that is sort of high on our
Okay.
development list.
Awesome. Thanks, Patty.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. So as per usual, if you have any questions or you need assistance or have any requests for future enhancements, please email us at support@makeSolutionsInc.com. And then also make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter, going to our Make Solutions website and selecting subscribe. And that way you'll receive email notifications for all of our release notes and important information that we have to go out to you. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And as I said, please feel free to email us if there's anything else that you need.